Lou, one of the things that was mentioned at the press conference was the fact that with Pittsburgh and Philadelphia being in the NHL, that makes Pennsylvania a growing bed for hockey. But your research shows that hockey's been big, especially in Pittsburgh, going back to the early 20th century.
Yeah, it was surprising with my research because I'm from the Pittsburgh area and I worked and lived in Pittsburgh, and I'm a hockey fan. I covered the Penguins when the original hockey draft up in Montreal, and then I was the hockey news correspondent for the Penguins, and I never heard of the story because back when I was growing up in the 50s and the 40s, the Duquesne Gardens had the Pittsburgh Hornets. They were the American Hockey League team,
and a very successful one too.
Very big. King Clancy and the whole bit, and we followed them, and so that's why they were great. They were just ripe for a major league team when NHL expanded in 1967. But I didn't learn until I was doing research about the Penn State hockey team when they announced the $80 million for the arena, that not only did they played back there, and I picked up a hint of that Penn State had played a game back in 1909, but that's when I learned that the Pittsburgh area was one of the hotbeds of the nation, and they'd hired the Duquesne Gardens management was an old trolley car barn. I mean, keep in mind that was the mode of transportation. They turned it into an arena for circuses and other things, and they put ice in it. And it was one of the first ice arenas around the country, indoor ice, because hockey was basically an outdoor sport. And so they brought Canadian players, professionals. They had professional teams. It wasn't the NHL. It might have been forerunner. I haven't got into the background of the NHL. You may know that. But they brought Canadian players down, and eventually one of the Canadian professionals helped coach this Penn State team, which was put together by the students who went down there and invited by the Duquesne Gardens to play at Christmas time in 1909, and they played Carnegie Tech and Pitt. Carnegie Tech on Christmas night and Pitt on New Year's night, and most of the Pittsburgh team, maybe the Penn State team, was made up of Pittsburghers, because
much like it is now.
Much like it is now, and it didn't mention the people from Philadelphia. I mean, and keep in mind the school only had the enrollment about 500 students total back then. So, but the student newspaper made notice that the people trying to put a varsity hockey team together back in that era, 1906 to 1910-11, were basically Pittsburghers, which was amazing.
And, of course, it didn't happen. Flash forward to 1939. There's another team really operating much like the club team of today that became a varsity team after its first season.
Right. The team actually played games in 1938. Okay, the students formed it themselves, and they got when they got that year, as I recall, it was the next year, 1939. They've got some money from the university. The president of the university gave them $100 in funds to help keep them on. $100 went a long way. But the kids then took one of the pickup teams, and the next year in 1939-40, I guess they call it, that season starting in December, and they still weren't formally. They were still basically a club sport. But the president had said, we'll give you a chance. Here's $100, give you a coach. Went under the physical education department. Dr. Arthur Davis was put in charge as the coach, and they played several games over that period. None of it. There was, as I recall, there's one home game. Okay, it was because it was outdoors. But most of the time they didn't have the ice melted here. Most of these games were away anyhow. The Hershey or Johnstown, that was where they usually played the games. And even played that team. I think even played in Charleston, West Virginia. Went over in Charleston and Huntington, West Virginia. So after the season was over, they went back, and the athletic association or the athletic department, who then approved varsity sports, retroactively made hockey a varsity sport.
And unfortunately, World War II came along, which really meant the demise of varsity hockey in the mid-40s after the war was over. Then the club team forms, and it's almost the same situation where there was some pressure against forming varsity hockey, but we all know the success that the club program has had, and now it has spawned what is going to become varsity hockey here at Penn State.
Well, as I said, I was always a hockey fan, and when I was running the sports museum, we'd get the sports camps over here. We used to call the hockey kids the stinky kids because they'd come right off the rink. They were great, and they'd always say, "Well, where's the hockey stuff? Where's the hockey stuff?" We'd say, "Well, this is only for varsity sports, because we've had several of the club sports wanted to have, at least in our timeline, or have a space here. Boxing been after us for years. Rugby's been after us, very successful of those clubs over the years, and ice hockey too. And I wish we could have done it. I mean, when we were working, if we'd had more room, we would have probably put an area just for clubs. So finally, now there is a timeline that Ken was able to get in, and it's now here. We now know that they're going to have to even add now the new timeline up there. I mean, my own opinion is that hockey's going to become a great winter sport here. The arena is going to be right across from basketball. What we understand now is they're going to keep the seating capacity down around the 7,000 range, so they can pack the place, which is true. And the demand to get in there with tickets, and I just think it's going to be great it's great for Penn State.
Lastly, one of the great things that I've talked about is the fact that Mr. John Dufford, who was a member of that 1939-40 team, one of two surviving members from that club, was able to be here for the press conference, and I think he's just as excited as you, me, Joe Batista. I mean, anybody involved. But this guy, John Dufford, I mean, he deserves it, I think, more than anybody.
Well, it's interesting. And look at this board, and I hope people who are watching this come in and see this. I mean, there's John at a young man. I mean, there's John at current age now in his uniform and all that. I mean, you could just see that. I mean, it's the same look in that face.
Yeah.
The same thing. And I just think it's great for a guy that there are two guys. I hope the other guy is in good enough health that they can be here, and I hope they can both be here when that building opens. I mean, it'd be very great to see John Duffer throw out the first ice, drop the first ice down there, and I mean, I don't know what he did. You know more about John and his background, what he did in his lifetime, but this has to be a lifetime thrill for him to see this happen.
Well, I know he served as a Marine fighter pilot in World War II in Korea.
Right.
So.
That tells you this guy's seen a lot of action.
Absolutely.
He's a very worldly guy, but I mean, I think it's great for. I think Joe Batista is maybe after Joe, that John may be the second most pleased person about what has happened.
Absolutely. Lou, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Steve.